The great hall of the alien palace shone with golden light, but to Princess Serenia it felt like a prison. She stood before her people dressed in ceremonial robes, her jeweled crown heavy upon her head. The air was tense, filled with whispers and unspoken fears. This was not a wedding born from love, but from politics. The Empire of Alindra had fought humans for decades, and now, to prevent further bloodshed, her father, the Emperor, had arranged a union between her and a human officer. To her people, this marriage was a sacrifice. To her, it was a sentence. She had grown up hearing stories about humans. They were called savage creatures, reckless in war, merciless in victory. The old generals described them as clever predators who smiled as they destroyed. Even when they fought fairly, they fought fiercely, and Alindran parents often warned their children that if they misbehaved, humans would come for them. Those stories had shaped Serenia's heart into a vessel of fear. And now she was bound to one. The doors opened and the human groom walked forward. Captain Marcus Hale, tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform plain compared to her glittering attire. His dark hair caught the light and his steps were calm, not arrogant, not rushed. The hall quieted as his gaze swept the crowd, then settled upon her. She trembled as his eyes met hers, expecting to see hunger, cruelty, or dominance. Instead, she saw something that confused her. His gaze was steady, unreadable, but not sharp like a blade. It was then respectful, almost gentle. The ceremony began. Ancient words of union were spoken, translated between their languages. Serenia's throat felt tight, her heart pounding so hard she feared the guest could hear it. When the time came to place her hand in his, she hesitated. The weight of her people's eyes pressed down on her, demanding she fulfill her duty. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she gave her hand. His palm was warm and strong, yet his grip was not crushing. He held her hand as if it were fragile glass, precious but never to be broken. She dared not look at him again, afraid that if she searched too deeply into those eyes, she would forget the stories she had been told. The vows ended. They were declared bonded by treaty, husband and wife before two civilizations. Cheers rose from the human diplomats, polite applause from the Alindrans. Serenia's father forced a smile, though his eyes betrayed sorrow. The princess lowered her head, hiding her fear from the world. To them, she was now the bridge between enemies. To herself, she was a lamb given to a wolf. Later that night, the palace arranged a small feast. Long tables of food stretched through the great hall, but Serenia touched none of it. She sat stiffly at the high seat beside Marcus, her gaze fixed on her untouched glass. The human captain spoke with ambassadors, his voice calm, his manner controlled. He laughed softly at their remarks, yet never forgot to glance toward her, as if making sure she was not lost in the sea of strangers. She avoided his eyes each time, for something about that steady look unsettled her more than hatred could. Hatred she understood. Respect she did not. When the feast ended, they were led to the chambers prepared for them. It was tradition that newly bonded couples shared their quarters at once. The thought filled her with dread. She walked slowly, her steps heavy, her guards behind her watching with concern. At the chamber doors, the guards bowed and withdrew, leaving her alone with the human. Inside, the chamber was quiet. Moonlight fell across the stone floor, and the bed stood wide and untouched. She kept her distance, folding her arms, her eyes fixed on the ground. Marcus closed the door behind them, but he did not approach. Instead, he spoke, his voice low and even. "I will not touch you unless you wish it. I know this marriage was not your choice. It was not mine either, but I will not harm you." His words were simple, yet each one carried weight. She looked up, startled, but quickly looked away again. Could this be a trick? Could kindness be a mask for control? She waited for him to demand obedience, to remind her of duty, but he did nothing. He crossed the room and set his weapon belt aside, then removed his jacket. He moved like a soldier who had long lived in discipline, every motion precise but calm. He sat on the edge of the bed, then lay back, resting his arms across his chest. His eyes closed as if he had no intention of pressing her further. For a long while she stood frozen, unable to believe it. Finally, she settled in a chair by the window, too restless to rest on the bed. Her eyes flickered toward him, watching for signs of deception, but he only breathed evenly, as if sleep had claimed him without struggle. As the night passed, Serenia's heart softened against her will. She remembered the moment in the ceremony when his gaze had caught hers. There had been no hunger there, no cruelty. Only a quiet strength, as if he carried a burden yet would not let it crush him. It was the gaze of someone who chose restraint when power was easy. She could not explain why, but that thought lingered with her, warming a place inside that had always been cold. The following morning, they prepared to leave Alindra for the human flagship. Crowds gathered as the shuttle lifted from the palace courtyard, carrying the newly bonded pair toward the stars. Serena sat rigid beside Marcus, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She dared not meet the eyes of her people, fearing she would see only pity. Marcus remained silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Yet when the shuttle broke through the clouds and the vastness of space spread before them, he spoke softly so only she could hear. "You are not a prisoner. You are my partner. I will prove that to you even if it takes a lifetime." Her breath caught and she turned to him despite herself. His eyes met hers once again, steady and unflinching. She had expected iron, but she found something else. It was not softness, no, his eyes were strong, unyielding. Yet within them burned a promise she could not ignore. For the first time since the arrangement had been announced, she felt the faintest spark of something she had never expected. Hope. She quickly turned away, not ready to let him see the storm within her. But the trembling in her hands began to fade. She still feared the path before her. But now, in some hidden part of her heart, she wondered if perhaps the stories she had been told were not the whole truth. Perhaps in time, she would see another story written in the gaze of the man who now stood at her side. The human flagship rose in the distance like a giant beast of steel. Through the small windows of the shuttle, Serena saw its vast frame gliding against the dark. Its metal skin reflected the stars, cold and sharp, so different from the elegant crystal towers of her homeworld. A shiver ran down her spine. This was not her world anymore. This was theirs. Marcus sat beside her, calm as ever, his gaze fixed on the view ahead. His presence was steady, like a mountain that neither storm nor fire could shake. Serena kept her eyes away from him, though she could feel the weight of his silence. She thought silence from a human soldier would be heavy, filled with pressure, but his silence felt different, like space itself, wide and patient. The shuttle docked. The sound of metal locking against metal echoed through the chamber. Guards waited at the landing bay, human soldiers in dark uniforms standing with discipline. Their faces were unreadable yet not cruel. Serena's breath tightened as Marcus rose first, motioning politely for her to follow. She hesitated, then stepped forward, the fabric of her long gown brushing the floor. The soldiers saluted Marcus, then glanced at her. She expected scorn, perhaps mocking smiles, but their eyes were controlled, respectful, as if they had been ordered to treat her with dignity. Still, she walked with her chin lowered, afraid that at any moment the mask would fall away. The halls of the flagship stretched endlessly, filled with light and hums of energy. It smelled of oil and steel, unfamiliar and cold. Marcus walked beside her, not in front, not behind, but at her side, as though reminding her she was not property but equal. Crew members stared in quiet curiosity, whispering as she passed, but none dared speak aloud. For them, this union was more than personal. It was political, a chance for peace. When they reached the quarters assigned to them, Marcus stopped at the door. He turned to her, his voice low but firm. "These rooms are ours. You may live here as you wish. No one will disturb you without my word." She studied the doorway, her heart racing. The chambers inside were far less decorated than the palace rooms she had known, but they were clean, warm, and surprisingly spacious. She entered cautiously, her eyes sweeping over the metal walls, the bed, the small table, and the screen glowing faint blue on the wall. Marcus did not follow her inside at once. Instead, he waited as if giving her time to breathe. That first night aboard the flagship was strange. Serena sat by the wide window of their quarters, gazing at the stars. Her world felt distant, almost unreal, as if it had been a dream. Now she floated among humans, surrounded by their machines and their voices. Yet through the reflection of the glass, she often saw Marcus sitting at the table behind her, reading data pads or writing reports. He never disturbed her, never demanded she speak. His gaze would lift at times, catching hers in the reflection, but it was never forceful. It was steady, as though silently saying, "I am here. I will not break you." Days passed. The princess began to learn the rhythm of life aboard the human ship. She walked the halls with Marcus or alone, always watched by curious eyes. Some humans bowed politely, others nodded. She listened to the strange music that flowed from their recreation halls. sharp and bold compared to the soft harmonies of Alindra. She tasted their food heavy with spices she had never known. At first she thought she could not bear it, but slowly she found small things she liked, yet the wall within her remained. She spoke little to Marcus, keeping her words short. At meals he would try to ask simple questions about her preferences, her comfort, her interests. She answered politely, never opening her heart. Still, he did not press her. He only listened and sometimes offered stories of his people, not of war but of oceans, mountains, and families. His eyes grew softer when he spoke of Earth's blue seas. She found herself listening, even when she told herself not to. One evening, an unexpected event shook her. She walked into a hall where two human crew members whispered harshly about her. They thought she could not understand their language, but she had been learning quickly. "The alien princess," one muttered. "A burden. Why tie us to her kind?" The other snorted. Better to keep her as decoration than risk her betrayal. Her chest tightened with shame and anger. She turned to leave, but Marcus appeared from the corridor. He had heard. His voice cut through the air, sharp but controlled. "Enough." The two soldiers stiffened, their faces pale. "She is your ally," Marcus said firmly. "You will treat her as such. Remember, respect is strength. Without it, you are nothing." His words carried the weight of command, and the men bowed quickly before fleeing. Serenia stood frozen, her breath trembling. Marcus turned to her then, his expression calm again. "Do not listen to them," he said. "Their ignorance is their weakness, not yours." She wanted to thank him, but her voice caught. Instead, she looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. His gaze did not waver. It was the same as always, strong, steady, and strangely kind. Something inside her shifted, though she quickly looked away. That night, she lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts turned again to the gaze she had seen during the ceremony. It was the same gaze he had shown her every day since. It unsettled her because it did not match the stories of cruelty she had been taught. Could it be that humans were not the monsters her people believed? Or was Marcus an exception? A rare flame among cold stones. Weeks passed, and though she remained cautious, she found her trembling less each time he looked at her. One small moment changed her further. During a training drill, an alarm rang across the ship. The lights flashed red, and Serenia panicked, believing it was an attack. She froze in the corridor, her body shaking as soldiers rushed around her. Then Marcus appeared, calm and unshaken. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder and met her eyes. "It is only a drill. You are safe." His gaze steadied her. The storm in her heart slowed, her breath returning. She could not explain why, but his presence alone calmed her fear more than walls of steel ever could. For the first time, she whispered his name. "Marcus." He looked at her, and though he said nothing, the faintest smile touched his lips. It was not triumph, not pride, but simple acknowledgement, as if her voice meant more than ceremony ever had. From that moment, something subtle grew between them. She still kept her walls, still feared the unknown future, but the cracks were there. When she sat by the window at night, she no longer sat alone. Marcus would sit across the room reading quietly, yet their silences began to feel less like distance and more like company. When she passed him in the halls, she no longer turned away so quickly. Sometimes she even dared to meet his eyes, and each time she found the same story waiting in them. She was beginning to realize that his gaze told her something words could not. It told her he was not a predator. He was not a captor. He was something else entirely. Something her heart did not yet understand but could not deny. And though she would never admit it aloud, each day she found herself trembling less, not because her fear was gone, but because a quiet hope had started to rise in its place. The days aboard the human flagship stretched into weeks, and the alliance between their two peoples seemed to grow stronger. Serenia had started to understand the humans better, though her heart was still caught between fear and curiosity. She no longer trembled each time Marcus looked at her, yet she kept her guard up, careful not to give her trust too quickly. Trust, she believed, could be a dangerous gift. Still, life with him was not what she had expected. He spoke gently, treated her with patience, and never forced his presence upon her. He carried himself with the discipline of a soldier, but his kindness was not an act. She could see it in the way he spoke to his crew, how he listened to even the lowest-ranked officer, how he treated them with respect. These small details worked slowly at the walls in her heart. One evening, as Serenia walked through the ship's observation deck, she stopped at the massive window that looked out into the stars. The galaxies shone like endless rivers of light, stretching beyond imagination. She had seen the stars all her life, but now they seemed different, closer, more alive. She pressed her hands lightly against the glass, lost in thought. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Marcus approached quietly, stopping at her side. "They remind me of home," he said. She turned her head slightly, surprised. "Your world has skies like this?" He nodded, his eyes fixed on the stars. "Not the same, but close. Earth's oceans reflect the night. When I was a boy, I would lie on the shore and look up, wondering what was beyond." For a long moment, they stood in silence. Serena wanted to ask more, but before she could speak, the ship's alarm suddenly wailed. Red lights flashed across the deck, and the voice of the commander echoed through the speakers. "Warning. Hostile ships approaching. All hands to stations." Serena's heart froze. She gripped the railing, her body trembling as memories of war stories filled her mind. She turned toward Marcus, fear sharp in her eyes. "What is happening?" "Stay with me," Marcus said firmly. His voice was steady, a shield against her fear. He touched her arm gently but with strength, guiding her toward safety. "It may only be scouts. Do not panic." The deck filled with soldiers rushing to their posts, the sound of boots against metal loud and urgent. Serena followed Marcus down the corridor as the ship shifted into battle readiness. Her breath came fast, her steps uneven, but he never let her fall behind. They entered the command center where human officers worked quickly at their stations. The large display showed several ships emerging from the dark. They were not human, and they were not Elindran. Their jagged shapes and dark colors marked them as raiders, mercenaries who thrived on chaos. Serena had heard of such pirates, killers who cared for nothing but plunder. "Shields up," the commander ordered. "Prepare weapons." The raider ships opened fire, bolts of energy slamming against the human flagship's defenses. The ship shook, lights flickered, and Serena cried out, stumbling. Marcus caught her before she fell, his arms steady around her. "You are safe," he told her, his voice low, his eyes locking on hers. The crew fought back, the sound of weapons rumbling through the walls. Serena's fear tightened her chest, yet she forced herself to watch. She saw Marcus at his station, speaking firmly, his commands clear. He was no longer just the man who sat quietly across from her at meals. He was a leader, sharp and focused, guiding his people with strength. She had expected cruelty in such a moment, but instead she saw discipline and care. He did not waste lives. He protected them. But then the enemy ships broke through the outer defenses and smaller raider craft began to breach the flagship itself. The alarms shifted to a harsher tone. "Orders detected. Prepare for close combat." The room tensed. Serena felt panic rising again. She turned to Marcus, her voice shaking. "They will come here." He looked at her and his gaze steadied her once more. "I will not let them harm you." The doors burst open and armored raiders stormed inside, weapons raised. Chaos filled the room as humans drew their weapons to fight. Serena gasped, pressing against the wall, her hands shaking. A raider advanced toward her, his blade glinting. She froze, her body refusing to move. Before the blow could fall, Marcus was there. He intercepted the attacker, blocking with his arm and driving him back with fierce precision. His movements were sharp, trained, not wild. He fought not with rage but with control. Every strike meant to end the threat quickly. The raider fell and Marcus turned, his body shielding Serena. "Stay behind me," he ordered. She could hardly breathe as the battle raged around them. Blasts of energy filled the air, shouts and metal clashing. She saw Marcus fight against another raider, his uniform torn, his face marked with sweat. He moved with the calm of someone who had lived through countless battles. But she saw also the risk he took, stepping into danger without hesitation to keep her safe. Then it happened. A raider's weapon struck him across the side, tearing through his armor. Blood spread across his uniform and he staggered. Serena's heart seized with fear. She cried out his name, rushing forward despite her terror. She reached him as he fell to one knee, his breathing heavy, his face pale. "I'm fine," he said quickly, though his wound told another story. Still, his eyes met hers, steady even in pain. That same gaze, unchanging, unbroken, held her where she was. It told her he would endure no matter the cost. It told her she was safe. Something inside Serena broke free in that moment. She no longer saw him as a stranger or a feared enemy. He was her protector, her shield, a man who placed her life above his own. Tears blurred her vision as she helped him to stand, her small hands pressing against his side to stop the bleeding. "You cannot fight like this," she whispered. His lips curved into the faintest smile even through pain. "I promised I would keep you safe." The humans finally drove the raiders back, forcing them to retreat. The alarms faded, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and wounded cries. Serenia sat with Marcus on the floor, her hands stained with his blood. She trembled, but not from fear of him. She trembled from the thought of losing him. For the first time since the marriage, she no longer saw him as the monster her people had warned her about. She saw him as a man who bled for others, who carried strength not for conquest but for protection. His gaze had always told her this story, but now she truly understood. When the medics arrived, they took Marcus to be treated. Serenia followed, refusing to leave his side. The thought of him lying wounded without her there filled her with a fear she had never known. As she watched him, pale and weak upon the bed, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. Her heart had begun to change. She had been given to him as a prisoner of politics. But in his gaze, in his actions, she had found something her world had never given her. She had found trust, and perhaps, just perhaps, something more. The flagship had recovered from the attack, but the tension lingered like smoke in the corridors. Serenia moved carefully through the ship, still shaken from the battle but determined not to show fear. Her steps were deliberate, her eyes scanning every corner. She had seen Marcus wounded. She had felt the terror of facing death, and yet she had also felt something else. The steady protection in his gaze, the quiet courage that refused to break. That night had changed her. She no longer trembled at him in fear, but a new question weighed on her heart. Could she trust him completely? Life aboard the ship had a rhythm now. Marcus was still recovering from his injuries, but he remained present, consulting with officers, monitoring the ship, and ensuring the crew remained ready. Serenia stayed close, watching how he moved through the chaos of command with patience and clarity. There was no arrogance, no need to dominate. Every order he gave was precise, measured, and always with the thought of protecting his people. Even wounded, he commanded respect effortlessly. One afternoon, as the ship traveled near the outskirts of Alindra's contested space, Marcus called Serenia to the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a blanket of glittering light. She hesitated, unsure if she should go. But the memory of his gaze that night, the promise, the safety, drew her forward. "I need your help," Marcus said when she arrived, his voice calm but earnest. "I want you to see something." She studied him carefully. He was uninjured now, though a faint scar ran across his side. His eyes, as always, were steady, but there was an intensity she had not seen before. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. He gestured to the display. "Our sensors picked up unusual activity. Not raiders, not humans, but something else. I need your perspective. Ilindran insight. You know the region better than anyone on this ship." Her pulse quickened. She was still learning about humans, and here he was asking her opinion as an equal. She felt a flush of pride and fear. Could she trust him with knowledge of her people? Could she offer insight without betraying secrets? But when she saw the earnestness in his eyes, she realized that he did not see her as a threat. He saw her as a partner. Together they analyzed the readings, discussing possibilities and strategies. Her voice grew steadier with each passing moment, her fear melting into focus. Marcus listened to her suggestions carefully, weighing them, asking questions, never dismissing her ideas. She realized that he treated her not as a tool, not as a political pawn, but as a mind capable of thought, judgment, and insight. That evening, as they worked side by side, a warning flashed on the main screen. A fleet of unknown ships approached rapidly. Their forms were dark, angular, and heavily armed. Marcus's jaw tightened. "They've been waiting," he muttered. "For us!" Serenia's heart jumped. "Who are they?" "We don't know," he said. "But they're organized and they're dangerous. This could be the start of a larger attack." The crew moved quickly to battle stations. Humans prepared weapons, shields activated, and Marcus coordinated everything with precision. Serenia stayed close, her mind racing. She had seen him fight. She had seen his calm in the chaos, but she had never expected the enemy to be so massive, so relentless. Then came the boarding. The enemy breached the hull, small craft landing directly onto the flagship's surface. Soldiers scrambled to intercept them, blasters firing, metal clanging. Serenia stood near Marcus, unsure of what she could do, but he did not hesitate. He guided her to the center of the bridge, keeping her close yet protected. "They will try to reach you," he said quietly. "Stay behind me. Watch, but do not move unless I tell you." The first wave of attackers fell to the trained crew, But a second wave broke through, moving faster and more coordinated. Serenya's hands shook as she watched, her chest tightening. A raider broke free from the skirmish, heading directly toward her. She froze, a scream forming in her throat. Marcus acted immediately. He intercepted the raider, blocking its weapon with his own. The force knocked him back, but he steadied himself. His eyes met hers for a fraction of a second, and in them she saw the same truth as before. He would not allow harm to come to her. That simple, steady gaze filled her with courage she did not know she had. The battle raged on, each second stretching endlessly. The flagship shuddered under attacks, yet Marcus's leadership never faltered. He coordinated humans and relied on Alindran advice, showing a seamless partnership that amazed the princess. She began to understand what he had been teaching her all along. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the will to act despite it. Finally, the enemy began to retreat. The remaining raiders fled, unable to overcome the disciplined defense. Alarms quieted, lights stabilized, and the crew let out relieved breaths. Marcus, though exhausted, moved toward Serenia. His uniform was scorched, a few cuts on his arms, but his eyes held the same steady warmth she had grown to trust. "You were brave," he said quietly, almost shyly. "Even when you were afraid, you did not run." She shook her head, trying to deny it, but the truth burned within her. "I was only able to stay because of you," she admitted, her voice trembling. "If you had not been there, Her words faltered. She did not finish. Marcus reached for her hand, holding it gently. "We faced it together," he said. "And that is what matters. You are not alone, Serenia. You never will be." For the first time, she let herself believe it. She had trembled at the thought of being with a human, fearing pain and domination. Now she trembled for another reason: hope. Hope that maybe in a galaxy torn by war and politics, she had found a partner who saw her as a person, a mind, and a heart. The aftermath of the battle was chaotic. Repairs were underway, and wounded were being treated. Serenia stayed close to Marcus, insisting on helping wherever she could. She discovered strength she had not known she possessed: the ability to act quickly, to comfort the wounded, to make decisions under pressure. Marcus observed her quietly, proud but never condescending. He treated her as he always had, as an equal. That night, in the quiet of their quarters, Serenia sat by the window. Marcus sat opposite her, reading but glancing up at times. She could feel a subtle shift within herself. Fear no longer ruled her. Respect had grown, then trust, and now a delicate, unspoken bond stretched between them. She thought of her people, of the stories she had been told of humans, and realized that she had been wrong. Humans were not monsters, and Marcus was no exception. He represented something greater: courage, kindness, and the ability to protect others without seeking glory. As the stars outside moved silently across the sky, Serenia understood something she had not before. This marriage had been forced, a tool of politics, but it had also given her a choice. She could cling to fear and doubt, or she could step forward even a little and embrace the possibility of trust, of partnership, of something more. Her gaze drifted to Marcus. He looked up from his data pad, meeting her eyes. That familiar gaze, steady and unwavering, held her attention. It spoke more clearly now than ever before. Not of dominance, not of control, but of faith. Faith that together they could face anything: fear or enemy, chaos or battle. And in that moment she trembled again, but this time not from fear. She trembled because she was beginning to see a future where she was no longer afraid, where she had a partner who would stand by her side, and where perhaps, just perhaps, she could find something she had never thought possible: trust, respect, and maybe even love. The galaxy had never been quiet for long. After the recent battles, the flagship sailed through space with its crew weary but determined. Serenia walked the corridors with a steady pace, her steps no longer trembling like before. She had seen fear, she had seen pain, and she had learned courage. And through it all, Marcus had been at her side, not as a stranger, not as a captor, but as a steadfast protector and partner. They had traveled to a sector far from Alindra, where whispers of enemy movements hinted at a greater threat. Marcus had been working tirelessly, coordinating intelligence, planning strategies to ensure the safety of both human and Alindran worlds. Serenia observed him often, noting the way he moved through the crew, giving orders without arrogance, listening without judgment, and inspiring loyalty with simple integrity. It was a kind of power she had never seen before, a power not based on fear, but on trust. One evening, as the ship floated silently near a cluster of uncharted planets, Marcus called her to the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced glass, and the planets glowed faintly, like jewels in the dark. Serenia approached cautiously, yet with a sense of purpose. She had come to trust him, and the trust had grown into something stronger, though she was not yet ready to name it aloud. "Serenia," he said, turning to face her, "we have an opportunity to prevent a war before it begins." His eyes were steady, but there was urgency in his voice. "A faction has been planning attacks on both our worlds. If we act carefully, we can stop them without bloodshed." Her brow furrowed. "How can we be certain? What if they anticipate us?" Marcus smiled faintly. "They may try, but we have something they don't. We have knowledge, strategy, and allies who trust us." His gaze softened as he added, "And we have each other." The weight of his words settled on her. Trust and partnership had grown between them over weeks of shared danger and quiet moments of understanding. She remembered the first time she had trembled in his presence, the fear that had gripped her heart. Now, as she stood beside him, she felt a strange calm, a certainty that together they could face the unknown. Plans were made swiftly. The flagship altered course, using stealth systems to approach the enemy faction's hidden base. Serenia assisted Marcus with the coordinates and strategy, offering insights she had learned about her own people's techniques. He listened carefully, valuing her knowledge, and together they devised a plan that relied on precision, intelligence, and restraint rather than sheer force. When they reached the target, the enemy was ready. Automated defenses and armed sentries lined the perimeter. The crew readied themselves, tension tight as wires. Marcus addressed the team with calm authority. "We move carefully. Neutralize threats only when necessary. Protect yourselves and others. We fight for peace, not conquest." Serenia felt her pulse quicken, but not with fear. She had trained, observed, and learned. She moved through the corridors beside Marcus, watching as he diffused tensions with a careful balance of diplomacy and authority. When a squad of enemy combatants confronted them, Marcus held them at gunpoint but spoke clearly, offering surrender and safety. To her astonishment, many laid down their weapons, persuaded by the fairness in his words and the unwavering steadiness in his gaze. Hours passed in careful maneuvering. The enemy faction had not anticipated humans and Alyndrans working together in such perfect coordination. Their plans unraveled before their eyes, and by the time the sun of a distant planet rose over the horizon, the threat was neutralized. No lives had been unnecessarily lost. The alliance between humans and Alyndrans had proven stronger than either had imagined. In the quiet aftermath, the crew gathered on the observation deck. Marcus stood with Serenia at his side, the two of them framed by the endless stars. The humans and Alyndrans alike watched the horizon, feeling relief and pride. The princess turned to Marcus, her eyes meeting his steady gaze. She remembered trembling in the great hall of her palace, the fear she had carried for weeks and the countless moments she had doubted what humans were capable of. She began, but words faltered. He lifted a hand, gently brushing hers. "You don't need to say anything," he said softly. "Actions speak louder than words." She nodded, letting herself feel the truth she had been avoiding. His actions had already spoken. He had protected her, respected her, trusted her, and fought alongside her. His gaze had always told her what words could not, that she was valued, seen and safe. That night, in their quarters, the flagship quiet except for the hum of engines, Serenia and Marcus shared a rare moment of peace. She looked around the room, realizing how far she had come. No longer trembling, she sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his presence without fear. "You have shown me so much," she said finally. "Courage, strength, patience, trust. I never thought I could feel this way." Marcus smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You had it in you all along. I only helped you see it." Her lips curved into a small smile, the first true one in a long time. The walls she had built around herself, the fear instilled by stories and tradition, had crumbled. She saw now that humans could be honorable, that Marcus was a man of integrity and heart, and that she had discovered strength within herself she had never known. In the days that followed, the flagship returned to its mission, carrying the princess and her human husband as symbols of hope and unity. Their presence inspired both human and Alyndraan crews. They had faced battles, political tension and prejudice, yet they had emerged stronger together. The bond between them had deepened beyond duty, beyond obligation, into something unspoken yet undeniable. When they finally communicated news of their victory to both governments, messages of congratulations poured in. The alliance was stronger than ever. Plans for cooperation, trade, and defense were set in motion. Elindrans whispered in amazement about the human captain who had treated the princess with respect and care, while humans admired the bravery and intelligence of the alien princess. The galaxy began to see that peace was possible when fear was replaced with trust and understanding. One evening, as they stood again on the observation deck, Serenia placed her hand lightly on Marcus's arm. He turned to her, eyes meeting hers with that same unwavering gaze. "I once trembled at the thought of being with you," she admitted, voice soft. "Now, I feel something entirely different." He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "And what is that?" "Hope," she said. "Trust, maybe even something more." Marcus's eyes softened, the weight of battles and politics momentarily fading. "Then we will face the future together," he said. "Whatever comes, we will face it side by side." She looked out at the stars, feeling the vastness of space, yet knowing that she was no longer alone. The galaxy was wide and unpredictable, filled with dangers and unknowns, but she had discovered something more important than fear: courage, partnership, and the unwavering promise of someone who saw her not as a prize, not as a pawn, but as a person. For the first time since her arranged marriage, Serenia smiled fully. The trembling had ended. In its place, she felt strength, hope, and the quiet warmth of a bond that could withstand anything. And as she turned to Marcus, their eyes met, steady and unflinching, telling a story no words could capture, a story of trust, respect, courage, and the possibility of love across worlds. The stars stretched endlessly before them, but now they were no longer distant or frightening. They were a symbol of what humanity and Elindra could achieve together. And in that endless sky, the princess finally understood what his gaze had been telling her all along: that she was safe, valued, and seen. That in the vastness of space she had found a partner, and perhaps something more. And so amidst the endless stars, two beings from different worlds stood together, united not by politics or obligation, but by the quiet, unshakable truth of trust, courage, and the possibility of something greater than fear.